Okay, we're gonna start with the first video, and thank you everyone who is sending the videos to react to. I got a lot of videos to react, but most of them are coming to my personal accounts in social media. I think it will be better for me just to follow along if you just leave the links or just tell me the title of something that I should look for in the comments of these videos. That's gonna be easier for me to just to manage everything faster. But anyway, if you want to keep it more private and want to keep sending to my personal accounts, then that's also fine. So today I just got another video from YouTube. So I'm just gonna open it and see what it is. I hope it's not too long. So if you're sending videos, please send it short if possible. If not, I'll find a way how to cut it. And I think this one is in English, so let's go for it. Okay, this is a video about Osho, I believe, and the video is not so long, so it's fine. So for what I see, he's talking about belief systems, and he's saying that he wants to destroy the belief system. I believe that he's talking about something similar that I learned with the Syrians, and that's related to this idea of not attaching too much to certain beliefs. Like, for example, I talk a lot about forms, and forms are basically stories that we have in ourselves that we are creating for ourselves for every event happening all the time. So let's say that there is something in front of us. Let's say there's a little girl in front of us, and then we start to create stories about what's happening with that little girl. And that's different for every person. So every time we are observing anything or even thinking about something, we are creating stories about whatever is in our mind. So these stories, this is what I call forms. And these forms are created by our beliefs. Let's say that if we believe in certain things, then we're going to create stories based on those beliefs. So something that I learned, and I'm just assuming that Osho is going to talk about this, and I like that guy actually. I don't know why. There are some people that you just like. So this is one of them. I don't like everyone in the spiritual world or spiritual gurus, but this is one that I like. I don't know why. I mean, I might not agree with everything he says, but anyway, I'm just guessing what he's going to talk about. But he's talking about belief systems. And based on the title says only belief systems. Okay, let's see what he says. Okay, I knew he will be talking about this tabula rasa. That means like to be kind of empty. That's in Latin. And I think he's going to be talking about not having any belief system or not being attached to certain ideas, and that's what the Syrians were calling this formless. So I was talking about the forms that we create all the time are based on the belief systems because these are stories that we are creating about everything that is happening. So basically our reality is just a subjective reality created by the stories we tell ourselves. So that's why we're always playing with forms. Reality is playing with forms individually. So that's how we create stories over stories, and that's how we call reality. So I believe Osho is talking about how to destroy the belief system and to experience a reality without defining things all the time, which is a state of mind that the Syrians call formless, to be without forms. So in other words, to not to create stories for everything and just observe it without defining things or without creating stories about every single thing. And when you become an observer, a conscious observer, then that's when you start to realize how you're programmed to believe certain things. And that's when you're consciously start to look at things, and then you get to know yourself a little bit better in this way. But let's continue with the video. I think he's talking about exactly the thing that I was talking about. It's just that many people talk about the same thing just with different words. So what I like to call it, based on what I learned with the Syrians, is to call it formless because you're not creating forms. So Osho mentioned that he has been living without any belief system, and what I translate, because we're using different languages. I mean, we're observing things in a different way. We have our own forms, and so the way I look at it is that he's basically looking at things just as an observer and not creating stories about every single thing he sees. And that's pretty much something I learned with the Syrians about how to live formless, to become an observer. And of course, there is nothing wrong with creating stories and start to see things in a specific way based on your belief systems. But the more aware that you are of those stories that you are creating for yourself, the more aware you are of how you're observing reality. Because that reality is not, I mean, yes, there is something, but you're interpreting that based on your belief systems and creating those stories that based on your belief system. So the more aware that you are of those stories and in your belief system, then you more consciously can choose because once you start to observe things in a specific way, you will be conscious of why you're choosing to believe that story that you just created, and you will see it in the moment that you're creating it, and probably you will discover that it's related to something that happened to you in the past, and then you will discover probably some traumas or many other things. But the thing is, like, self-observation or just observing the stories that you're creating, it helps you to understand your belief system. And also he mentioned about programming, because we are so programmed for so many years to believe certain things that it will take some time to observe all these things that we are programmed, like all the beliefs that we have. And but after some time of observation, then it becomes a little bit easier for you to keep observing. So I totally agree with everything he's saying. I think that's what he's talking about. And it's just we are just using different words, but I think we're aligned in this way of looking at things. So I'll just continue watching the video. Okay, he's talking about ego now, and that's something very interesting because in spirituality people talk a lot about ego, but but usually I look at it like people talk about it from an external perspective and not so much from an internal perspective. So let's say that you become more aware of the things that you're looking at, the stories that you're telling yourself based on the things that you're looking at. So once you look at those stories, because what is ego? Ego is when you react to something. Let's say there's a trigger. Let's say there's this little girl on the street, and then you create a story. And the ego cannot exist without you creating a story. So let's say that you just observe the whole thing. You don't create any definition of what's happening. You see the little girl, and you see that something is happening. There is an image in front of you, let's say. And the same can happen if you're looking at the screen. But you look at it without creating stories, without thinking, oh, this little girl is lost, or this little girl is probably looking for someone. So you don't create any of those stories, and you're just looking at the girl and observing without creating any story. So that if you don't create any story, you are not applying any definition. You are not applying any belief system. Including the ego is not going to be there. So the the belief system creates those. I mean, those stories are created based on your belief system, but your belief system also will integrate some ego if you have some at the moment, because it's temporary. It can be temporary. Then you create those stories with ego. But if we're not looking at the stories, we might not even realize that there is some ego involved. And then the whole reality that we're experiencing is related to the belief system and some ego if we somehow apply it. So we might never know if there's something triggering us that allowing us to involve some ego in some stories. And well, anyway, he's talking about all of this. I'll continue with the video. Okay, that's the end of the video. Well, I think I like that guy. And anyway, if there's someone I don't like or I just don't agree with, I'll just gonna say it openly. But I don't know why I like this guy. I don't know everything he says. I don't know I don't know all his material, but I feel good listening to him. Anyway, I think the point of this video was that that we can live formless. I mean, this is how I call it. And but also there's nothing wrong with having some stories based on what we see. But the more conscious we are of those stories at any time, and then we can live making decisions more consciously. And our reality, of course, is going to change the way we look at reality. Because many times we don't realize, but the reality for us is just a bunch of stories that we are telling ourselves all the time, one next to another, and we're creating like a movie with a lot of stories, and we call it reality. So every time there's someone saying in reality, well, that's just their reality because that's a subjective point of view of decoding reality based on their belief systems and many other things. So so yeah, that's why the books and these videos are called playing with forms, because this idea of reality is basically every person playing with forms. But anyway, thank you for this video. I hope I added some context to, or I answer whatever was the question, whatever the question was, but I didn't see any questions, so I'll just go for the next video and see you in the next video.